David, welcome to the Men Made for More podcast. I am stoked to have you on here today, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So us, former guest, my first two-time guest, got us connected, and I was excited to learn from you because you have such a unique background with nervous system and breathing and things that we're going to get into here deep today. But why don't you start giving listeners a little overview of your story, personally, professionally, where you're at and what you're up to?
All right. So I started out actually as an industrial engineering degree. I went to Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. I actually wound up in IT, career for 10 years as a project manager. So I was dealing a lot with efficiency of that type of stuff, like putting things together, making things are on schedule and on time, and managing people and things like that. So for me, it wasn't the calling, I would say. So I was looking for a switch. It was a tough decision. I did spend some time like doing like a career coach, therapy, a couple other different things to kind of work through what I actually wanted to do. I had some ideas. I was definitely always into sports, loved basketball, growing up playing it, all that type of stuff, golf, and a few others, football, baseball, soccer. So kind of like a sports fanatic type of person, always into sports. That was kind of like my life. So I looked into like a sports management type of thing, like a post masters, and just didn't seem like I was going to be getting to the level that I wanted to be at. Like it was like a very tough cutthroat. You want to be like an agent or announcer or something like that. You got to know the right people. So I kind of went away from that. I was told that I wouldn't like being a personal trainer because I wasn't going to make enough money by the career coach. So I had shelved that for a while. And then I actually just went back to it and decided to do it. So I did like a vocational type school in New York City, which was really cool because as opposed to maybe just doing like like the NSCA test and studying for it, and then in a weekend or whatever, how long it would take for me to study, then I would be certified. I really wanted like some hands-on application. So that was really awesome. It was called Focus Personal Training Institute in New York City. So if anyone's thinking about being a personal trainer and they're in that area, I highly recommend that. The experience was awesome. So like half the day would be in the classroom, half the day would be applying it on the floor, and all the basics of anatomy and biomechanics and, all the bodybuilding, weightlifting type of stuff. So from there, I became really interested as part of that. Like we would dive into special populations a little bit and injuries and things like that. And I myself had multiple knee surgeries from 12 to 16 years old. Sorry, getting a phone call. So for me, that was really appealing because I wanted to help people that had pain and injuries and stuff like that too. So I started to really think about where I wanted to work, being that I was not really thrilled with my previous career. I was trying to be systematic about where I was going to work. So I had interviewed at a couple like the known gyms, like a Crunch and a couple other ones like that, and Equinox, and that could have went to those, and just ultimately decided it wasn't really the right fit for me, like for the personality and the stuff I was looking to do. And randomly, like I was talking to someone the day before, and he was recommending that his son went to this gym locally that I grew up near. I didn't even really know much about it, but it was a fitness and wellness, so it was like affiliated with a hospital. So Robert Wood Johnson Fitness and Wellness. He mentioned it. The next day, I got an email from one of the recruiting websites that they have an opening, and I was like, "That's an odd occurrence, right?" So I was like, I should probably look into it. So I sent him my resume. I go there, and I just really hit it off with the manager at the time. It was the first person I met that I was like, I feel like I can really learn from her, and I like her and like that type of stuff. So it felt like the right fit. And they had physical therapy on site, swimming pool on site. So that was really cool and was a good place for me to start and get some experience working with other trainers and in the gym. And actually at the same time, while I was doing that, I started my own company, which is called Fenomenal Fitness, which I still run now. So I was working in the morning, waking up for clients in Jersey City where I was living in New Jersey at like probably 6 a.m. starting with clients, working with them till maybe 10, have like an hour break for like a nap or some sort of meal. And then I would work at the gym in the afternoon and often close the gym at 11 p.m. and then do it all over again. So first couple of years in, I was already working myself pretty hard. And then it just kind of, at that point was like, I gotta figure out where I want to go with this. Do I want to just keep working at the gym or do my own thing? And ultimately, obviously for financial reasons, personal reasons, time wise, and everything else, doing my own business seemed like the right way to go. So I've been doing that, I think now for like 4 years, just the business on my own. So that's been really cool.
That's awesome. And I'm curious. I'm always curious when people have either career changes or, jumping into business for yourself. What were, you mentioned the personal training career you kind of got away from, and then all of a sudden you just came back to. What eventually led you to be like, hey, I'm going to go for this, even though my career coach is telling me the cost isn't good, even though it might not be the best financially. What eventually pushed you over the edge in that decision?
I think it was ultimately like there was no way I was going to know which thing was going to be right unless I did it. And I think like a lot of people I read about now that like have these different types of like careers and stuff like that, or wind up doing something like, I didn't know about this then, but they would be doing lots of different things and eventually figure that out. I kind of didn't have that much of an experience from like a job level type thing, I would say. But it was more of like a gut check, I think. It just kept coming back to that. Right. So I was like, I just got to try it out. And if it doesn't work out, then I can try something else. But it basically like there was no way I was going to know 100% if I liked it or not. And there always was going to be like fears of what if, you're a trainer. So people have to like you. You have to manage your own business pretty much. Even if you're working at a gym, it's like you're like almost like the salesperson also and all that type of stuff. So, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself coming from a place of comfort in some sorts where someone else is writing your paycheck, no matter how well you really do. And I'm always trying to do good, but I think it was just the sports stuff, the background of sports, wanting to be somewhere around something that was athletic, and ultimately the fact that I just kept coming back to that. And I think I was making decent money. That wasn't making me happy. So I think what I was thinking was I can still probably figure out a way to hopefully make better money. Like I'm not going to be settling with like the average personal training career was my thing. So, I'll try to be good at it and then figure out the financial end of it and make that less of the concern at first versus like what's actually going to make me happy to wake up and go to. Cause that's where I was at with the previous career. It was like, I don't even want to wake up anymore. So
Yeah, I love that you followed your gut with it, and especially when it kept coming back to it. And because we get a lot of people listening, it's either they're like, I kind of want to do this other career, or like you, I want to start this business, but there's that something holding people back. We can find all sorts of barriers or reasons why we shouldn't. When you got to the point of starting your own business, then so you said a couple of years at this, was it at the point where your business was taking off more, to the point where it was like, this is logically feasible and I can build on this? Or was it just like you were so worn down from working 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. that you're like, all right, I got to go for this?
It was a little bit of both. The manager that I started with was leaving. So she was leaving. I felt like she taught me a fair amount. Just learning from the team, there was some good quality team members there. I learned some really great stuff from them. And then, when you're looking at your time management and you're getting paid like a third of what you could do on your own or whatever, something like that, you start to think, well, I'd like to spend more time with my girlfriend, or I'd like to, spend more time with my family. And this is not going to happen if I continue to do both. So something's got to give, basically. And I think that was a big piece of it. And just like, knowing that you're going to be like not really answering to anyone and doing your own thing is pretty nice too. So like when you're spending those hours just doing what you need to do. I think also the fact that I had gotten into a neuro-based approach was changing like how I was doing things. So that might not basically fly with every gym. Some of the things that you're doing, as far as like you're doing some very different things than some of the other trainers. And maybe the people that are managing you have no idea what you're even doing either. So there's some like gaps in the understanding of what you're doing that was like, I don't really want anyone like asking what I'm doing. I just want to go ahead and do it. And like, if I'm doing vision drills with people, I want them to feel comfortable doing it while they're doing it. And I want myself to feel comfortable teaching them and coaching them and not having people like gawking at us basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, anytime someone challenges the status quo of what looks normal or what should be normal, it gets questioned, and it gets like it can get bottled up a little bit. Of you're trying to do something, you're learning these new things, you're learning these skills, and the people that aren't and are staying complacent, and nothing wrong, I'm sure, with the way they were training, but if they're not growing and they're seeing these things, it's easy to be like, hey man, why don't you ease up on that, because that looks weird, or we're, that's not what we do here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there's some talks about like, well, you got to make sure you're certified to do like from Z Health to do whichever drills that you're doing. You have to. They were starting to say things like that, and I was like, I don't, or like, don't be too. Someone said to me, don't be too loud about talking about this brain stuff. You don't want like everyone to hear that. And I'm like, this is what everyone needs to hear. Like they need to hear that like their brain is in charge of everything. So to me, I didn't want any of that to hold me back, and it was kind of the timing was right anyway. It was less of that. It was, I think that was a very small factor, to be honest. It was more like I wanted to get the experience of working in a gym just to, if I had just done it only on my own and never worked in a gym with other trainers, I think that would have limited some of my experience and stuff like that too. So
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good to be around other people and learn from them, whether it's what you do want to be doing or don't want to be doing, and just being exposed to that crowd can be helpful. But that's with the brain stuff you're talking about, it's a good transition into, what we want to be diving into here, because, you're big on the nervous system and breathing and these topics that, some people might have heard of. Like we were talking about before we hit record here, it's something that you and I are very aware of, and we know of it, so we assume that everyone else knows about it. But when you talk to people about it, it's really a topic that is either poorly understood, flat out misunderstood, or things that people have no awareness of. So for those that have zero knowledge, for those listening and they're listening to, a podcast to further their life, to get fit, to do these things, and they're hearing like nervous system and breathing, why are we spending an episode on this? So for those with zero knowledge on the importance of this and how to kind of show them why they should maybe buy in a little more to this, how would you kind of briefly explain the importance of it and why it is so important for people listening?
yeah, so the first thing with any new client or anyone that I'm talking to about this in general, there has to be like a little bit of education up front just to get a little bit of awareness. And I think that like the awareness is one of my favorite things about doing the nervous system training is you're not aware that your breathing could be affecting how much you lift. You're not aware that your vision could be affecting your range of motion. You're not aware that like your other senses actually are involved in how your brain feels about you doing stuff. So it's cool because some of the things that happen are very unexpected. But at first, like a little Neuro 101, I think Os went through this also. I was listening to his podcast with you, but for anyone that didn't hear that one, we're always thinking about inputs, right? So any of those sensory inputs that I just mentioned, it could be smell, taste, hearing, vision is a big one for us. Touch, obviously, too. So anytime you're doing a foam roller or you have hands-on technique, massage therapist or anything like that, any of those things could be affecting your movement. So we're very concerned with how can we influence your movement using those inputs. And then we see how does your brain integrate and decide if that's good for you or not. And that usually the way that we see that is via an output. So we're very assessment based, right? So for me, initially talking to someone, that Neuro 101 is important because everyone, for the most part, as we talk through, is focused on, I want to jump higher, I want to lose weight, I want to lift more, I want to run faster, all those things. And those are all outputs, and they're great outputs, they're great goals. But if you're like most people, just doing the general programming is going to either get you so far or it's going to like plateau at some point, right? So yeah, most people that have been working out for, a few years, 5 years, 10 years, I think they're a little more apt to say, well, I'm looking for anything that can help me, lift 10 more pounds, or I've been running for 15 years. If I could get a new breathing technique that could really be influential. I think you start to think about these things more as you've already like exercised a bit, as you've already done some of these things. But at the same time, if I have someone that starts with me and they're 70 years old and they've never exercised, I just tell them I don't have to, break any bad habits either, because we're going to start fresh with this mentality of the neural lens of seeing how does it assess and reassess. And what that does too is I think it takes a little bit of the emotion out of the consequences or the results too, because if it works, we stick with it. If it doesn't, we can come back to it or put it on the shelf, So um, that basically understanding that breathing, though, if we go strictly back to breathing, how it can impact so many different things. I think the biggest thing is, yes, understand that, but then understand how it applies to your goals, right? So it's one thing to say, smell could influence your range of motion, but if I can show you that, that makes a big difference. But say you come to me and range of motion is not what you want. If you want to run faster and we do a new breathing technique and your, mile pace time goes down by 40 seconds, that's going to be a big deal for you, right? So tying it to the goals is very important. So, lots of the reasons that I went in, I was talking about loving going into special pops was dealing with a lot of people in pain post rehab. What I was seeing was I'm doing the protocol. Like I'm doing, this person had a ACL surgery or a knee replacement. I'm doing the 5 knee exercises I've been told they need to do, and they're getting weaker or they're still in pain, and they're asking me why they're still in pain. And that was, as someone who's like engineering background, that's very frustrating. Like I couldn't like really just wrap my head around that either. So once I was told about the nervous system stuff and how vision could impact this, it all kind of like was a big light bulb for me, because you start to see that it's neurology, which is science, right? So it's very backed by research. It's very backed by results and things like that. So when you think about breathing, again, like you could be doing, someone might have high blood pressure and they might have anxiety, they might have strength issues running, they might have sleep apnea or snoring issues and energy issues, right? So there's the gamut of things that like breathing and the research has helped people with is huge. So if you're someone that has never really thought about how breathing could impact those things for you, I think just implementing like something from today or maybe something else, if you start to look into maybe some of the things that like you could read about, they could certainly be life changing just by focusing on breathing alone, not knowing all the neurology.
Yeah, and I think that's huge. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because people listening, we'll get into some of the science in it. We'll try not to go too deep for people to overwhelm them, but at the same time, you don't have to know exactly why these things work. You just have to see that they are an integral piece, the same way that strength work is, the same way that mobility work is, the same way that your cardiovascular, your conditioning training is. Like, this is just another tool in your toolbox, a very important one that drives all those other things as well, that can be huge for your performance, can be huge for how you're feeling if you're dealing with any pain or injury. Because, and I'll let you kind of fill in the gaps here if I miss anything, David, but input output, when you mention those things, input can be something as simple, just tying this into things you're doing normally. If you're foam rolling, that's you're changing the input for it, and then the output is more range of motion. You're like, wow, I feel so much better. I'm standing, my posture is better. I'm doing these things, versus just trying to stretch your way to better mobility or try and force your way to better posture. It's giving an input to your nervous system that creates this output of feeling better. And it sounds like the same breathing can work the same way. And would you, anything you'd want to add to that, or are you in line with that?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely 100%. I think one of the coolest things about breathing is you don't need a foam roller. You don't need a lat machine, pull down machine. You don't need anything. Like literally, you could be practicing breathing um, wherever you want, whenever you want, however you want, and you could try different things and see what works for you. So that I think that's what a huge advantage of the breathing is. If you're already someone that's into improving your health and you go to the gym like an hour a day, you could do breathing work on the way to the gym when you're driving there, or if you're riding your bike to the gym or whatever, however you get there. You could do breathing work. There are ways to try to change your breathing when you're sleeping. So you literally don't even have to necessarily think that much about it, but you do something that maybe it'll help with your snoring and maybe it helps your energy, like I said. So I think that's the beauty about the breathing is you can do it while you're doing your exercise. You can do it outside of the exercise. And, a lot of the research says like 8 to 12 minutes a day of awareness towards breathing can make like drastic changes for your health. So it's not like a huge time investment either. And there's lots of different ways to breathe. So if you try one and you do it for a month and it doesn't, make a big difference for you, you can try another one, right? So you literally could say, this year I'm going to try 12 new breathing things and try a new one every month. I guarantee you'll find one that helps you.
Yeah. I love those things. I'm sure people listening too. It's that low time investment, but such a high yield on return. And for those that are looking for, and I can hear the people, the skeptics already being like, well, breathing. Yeah. Like, sure. I'm breathing already. It's not like I'm holding my breath throughout the day, but when we talk breathing, there's specific techniques and ways to unlock performance to feel better. Can you maybe talk one or two practical strategies you like or practical breathing techniques that you give people maybe early on that people can kind of start to raise awareness with and become more familiar with?
A really simple one, I think, just to get back to the input output thing that I really loved myself early on, just as a first iteration of how could breathing impact my movement, right? So you can try this very easily if you're already working out, is you could try, we do like 4 different breathing patterns when you do a squat, right? So typically, what would you say the breathing pattern is when someone's doing a squat? What would they normally do?
Probably big inhale on the way down and exhale on the way up.
Yeah. So that's typical, right? So we'll do that. So we would do an assessment, right? So you do maybe something that is of concern for you. So you have a tight shoulder, you might do a shoulder flexion, which would be raising your arm up in the front with a straight elbow. You could do internal rotation of your shoulder. You could do a toe touch. You could do a rotational exercise where I literally rotate from your spine. So if you're standing up, you make like a gun with your fingers and you try to rotate as far as you can left and right. So those are some key range of motion ones that we typically use. So you do that before. Then you would do the squat that you just said. And you would do about 3 to 5 of those squats, right? So you would do inhale, big inhale on the way down, exhale on the way up. And then you'd reassess that, right? Then you would I'm going to do a breath hold, right? So I'm going to do an inhale, and then I'm going to do a squat, and then I'm going to exhale after I get back to the top. So I do a breath hold per every squat. So say I did 5 of them, I would hold my breath during the whole descent and the whole rise, and then exhale afterwards. Then I would reassess. Then there's another one where you actually do, it's a little bit harder, but you breath hold for all 5. So you do an inhale, breath hold for all 5, come back up, exhale, reassess. So after each one of these, you're reassessing. Then the last one would be the actual reverse of what you would normally do, the one that you said, which I had never done before when I did this, right? So that one I know for a fact, I probably held my breath accidentally, right? Maybe not on purpose, but that one was like, this is different. So I do exhale on the way down, inhale on the way up. And for me, the first time we did the 4 of those at a course, it was the only one that assessed well. And now I'm someone with knee pain, doesn't really like squatting that much, could never get as low as the people that I was in school with for squatting and stuff like that. Always, got to a decent amount of weight, but it was never a great squat. And now you're sitting there thinking like, I could have had better squatting the entire time had I known that breathing was important towards my squat. So like, and sometimes it might actually like make the actual movement feel better while you're doing it, which is another assessment within it, right? So if you do get lower and it feels smoother, that would also be a nice little like cherry on top. So I think that one's awesome because I just made the example with squat, but you could do that with a push-up, you could do it with a pull-up, you could do it with a row, you could do it with any exercise that you want that you're trying to get better at, and it might influence the change that you're trying to work on.
That's super cool. And for those listening, just a quick clarification. I think David would back me up on this. This isn't when you're trying your 1 rep max. This isn't when you're loading up, loading up your heaviest 5 rep effort that you just start playing around with doing the opposite breathing. But quite follow-up question on that is, so is that consistent, that breathing pattern across a lot of people you work with, or is this very unique person to person?
So that's a perfect question. So what we'd see like in a population of people, say like a room of 30 people, is out of those four, there would be a mix of who assess well with which one, right? And then as you get deeper and deeper into the nervous system curriculum, you might be thinking, well, which part of the brain is that activating for that individual? And is that something that they need more of? And then like if that correlates with like the vision work that you're trying to do with them, or maybe some vestibular work, which is the balance system, it might be a tool that you use with them as an easy like stack, we call it. So you're basically doing stacking by doing a squat and thinking about your breathing. You're doing two things at once. So sometimes to create the change the person needs, you have to do multiple things at once. In order to like our end goal is neuroplasticity, which is basically creating change within the brain. Like they taught for, I think it was, they said 70 to 90 years in early neurology that the brain is hardwired and it didn't change. And we know very much so now that it's plastic, that it's, adaptable, and that it changes like no matter how old you are, right? Like there was like, I think there was something like once you were 21 or 23 or something like that, it stopped. And they're seeing neuroplasticity in 80 to 100-year-old people, so it's always adapting, always changing. Your brain's always paying attention to everything that you do, and it's a use it or lose it platform. So you can create a lot of change if you're just by doing the right breathing pattern. So for the coach, they might know actually like we're actually training this part of your brainstem while we do that breathing pattern instead of this part of your brainstem, and that can make all the difference for that individual.
And we've seen it firsthand in our clinic of people breathing alone, getting people out of pain in, chronic pain too, at times, years of pain in a single session. And that doesn't happen. We didn't improve their true mobility, or we didn't change their muscle length or anything over time, but it's just this changing the nervous system and changing those inputs create these outputs that are just beyond what happens with true like hypertrophy or muscle strength or true muscle length change. And so it's something that's fascinating, and definitely people can, if people can buy into it, it can be really life-changing for those that are willing to try it.
Yeah, I mean, you can get like some pretty jaw-dropping, like instantaneous results sometimes that stick, for people, like a one vision drill, and like their acuity changes, like literally their ability to see is better. So it's like, it's crazy because most people don't even know that that's something that can change, right? So that's like that awareness thing that I was talking about. Like we're assessing to see if this changes their vision. No one would normally think that that's possible, but it is, right? So and that can have huge changes on you knowing how important vision is. So it's cool that you've seen stuff like that, because it's good to know that that's possible, but also you got to keep people, their expectations also, that this change is going to happen at the speed that your nervous system allows to happen. So where someone, I'm jealous when someone does a drill and it makes them that much better the first time. But like sometimes it takes, the actual 12 weeks or a year or whatever to really practice this stuff too. So I like to keep the expectations like in line also when you start with stuff like this.
Yeah, such a good point. And saying those examples, those examples are the ones that get highlighted, rightfully so. But at the same time, there's plenty of people that, and I think we just want to reiterate that it's like you focus on your health, your nutrition, your sleep, the quality of food you're eating, the quantity of food you're eating. This is again another one of those things that drives a lot of those things. It's kind of the umbrella that encompasses all those things, but at the same time, it's not like you can just focus on this and then neglect those other things too and see change quickly. But I know you mentioned earlier too, the like for your example of your knee pain pretty much going away from some of these techniques. How do you address this with pain or injury? Because I think a lot of people listening dealing with nagging stuff, former athletes, active people, that guys that are like, I hear it all the time. It's like, well, I'm getting old, so I'm always going to have this injury. But this is probably something that people haven't tried. They've maybe tried stretching and massage and maybe in physical therapy, but how can this play into the pain that someone's feeling, or maybe chronic overuse type injuries?
Yeah, so like a big part of understanding pain is just kind of like little bit of education too. So we know for a fact that pain is 100% of the time an output of the brain, right? So obviously, if you have, a car accident or side swiping tackle like in a football game, and there's a blowout type of injury, of course, usually there's gonna be pain associated with those, but still, at the end of the day, that pain's going to be that if they do have pain, it's going to be an output of the brain. We know these things from some pretty cool different things like phantom limb pain, if you've heard of that. Basically, people like are missing a limb and it still hurts. So this helps explain that there's no way that like if your hand hurts and it's gone, that's still that's proving that it's an output of the brain. So that's one of the cool ways that we understand stuff like that. We also know that it's the output of like highest importance. So it's telling you to change something. So it's actually like a behavioral change tool for you to say, like, my knee hurts, I should be doing something different, right? So basically knowing that I think helps people initially with just a little bit of the gravity of pain and like how it's kind of like it looked at as something that's not it's negative, right? So if it's telling us to change something and we can actually help figure out which thing or things to change, I think that makes it more hopeful. Because like there's something to do about it versus it just being a negative thing. But as far as like how could like breathing be playing a role in injury, it goes back to me discussing the brain activation, right? So if it's 100% output of the brain, and I know that I do a breathing drill with you and it activates X part of your brain, right? So it's like if someone was doing biomechanical thought process of like my shoulder hurts, I'm going to do shoulder work. The thought process from a neuro perspective would be your shoulder hurts. What about how does your parietal lobe feel about that? Right? How does your pons in your brainstem feel about that? And those are specific areas, but it's just anatomy, right? So if we know specific drills that activate those areas and then the shoulder pain goes down, that's a huge game changer, right? Because we know like someone, for instance, will look at like a percentage of people that go for shoulder therapy. Well, not 100% of them are going to come out with no pain, right? So say that number is somewhere between 40 and 60%. What about those other people? And that's like that was the driving question behind me wanting to learn more, was like like I was describing earlier. I'm doing the exercises that like their post rehab protocol calls for, but it's not helping, right? So most of the time if the regular route of therapy didn't help you, it might be stemming from something else, like vision or breathing or something else. So if we try a breathing drill, like I said, it doesn't help. It's just more information for us to know which areas like we don't need to address right now, right? So it always gives more information when we try stuff and assess things out, because it starts to delineate what's working and what's not. So even things that don't work are important.
Yeah, so well said. Because I think that the two takeaways I got from that is, one, we need to look elsewhere if the traditional thing isn't working. If you have a shoulder injury, sure, it's okay to start with the shoulder. If that may clear it up if it's a local thing, but probably more often than not, there is other components to it and looking away from the problem. But the second piece that always goes along with that, and which you've already alluded to earlier, is the importance of test retest. Because if you're not trying things and then testing range of motion or having a test that you can go back to, then you don't really know if it's improving. I know people that have followed done like a crossover symmetry routine for their shoulders for, 16 months and not seen much of any improvement. It's like, hey, maybe we need to start looking elsewhere if you're still having the shoulder problem, because we should see change if you're consistently putting a certain input in and not getting the right output. You need to start looking somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of that's the reason for the assessment too, is it helps drive the program, because we talk about wanting to know, is that helping your shoulder right away? So if I do a vision drill with you and assess it, and your pain was a 5 and now it's a 4, that's part of your program because it's helping, right? So if you do more of that, we get the right dosage of that really can change it. Like, do that drill every day, 3 times a day, 6 times a day, whatever the dosage is. And that's a little bit of like the tweaking that needs to happen sometimes. Is if you go do it 3 times and it helped, perfect. If it didn't, get rid of it. Maybe you need something else, or maybe you just need more of it, right? So we play with those things to kind of help figure it out. We already know it's helping, which is good. But rather than, like you said, I'm going to do something for 16 weeks and hope and pray that it helps, and maybe it didn't. And like, I have a perfect example of a client who had an ankle injury, and I, like, the same thing. I said, the route that you should go is go to physical therapy, because that's what you should do. You're having an acute injury. It's you're going to be covered through your insurance. So you don't have to spend money like with me. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, contact me. Right. So he's doing it. It's not working. So it does like a certain amount of time with it, gives it some time. It doesn't work. And when we start to assess what they were doing, because I need to know, like, are the exercises they were actually having you do helping or not, they were making him worse. Right. So he was like a left ankle injury, and they were having him do like alphabet with the ankle. Great exercise. Awesome. It's a complex movement. Brains love complex movements. However, this is a perfect example of something that we talk about early on in our neuro curriculum, is your same side brainstem inhibits pain on that side, right? It is activated though by contralateral or opposite side of the body movement, right? So if I'm trying to activate, if those were on video, the left side of my brainstem, I have to do right-sided complex movement, right? So for him, I'm thinking I need left-sided brainstem activation to maybe lower the pain. So guess what we did? We did alphabet ankle drills with his other ankle, and I helped get rid of the pain.
Wow.
So it's close. It's like you're doing a great drill, but it was just the wrong stimulus. And that's that whole input, integrate, output thing. And he needed more sensory work on that side. And we need, like we do when we talk about sensory, we try to get into like a thorough testing of sensory, right? So if I put a cold pack on you, is that assessing better immediately or not? So for some people, the cold could help, but for some it's not. And without the assessment, you're just assuming that it's going to help, right? So one of the things that was happening was putting a cold pack on him, or actually it was just a cold device that I had. It was like a metal device, so it was cool temperature, was actually bringing the pain back. And the end of every physical therapy session was a cold pack, which that means he's leaving there potentially in a worse state than when he got there. And we needed to like figure out why that's freaking your brain out a little bit. So it's still important, right? Because you're like, if you put something on there that's cold, your brain doesn't like it. So we got to figure out a way to like make that less threatening, which is part of the process. But it just adds like a layer of depth to the process that can really make that change for that other, we say maybe it was 40% of the people that it worked for. There's 60% of people saying physical therapy doesn't work. And I don't think that's true. I just think it's understanding the specificity for the individual is a game changer. And that's where like this nervous system stuff really, that's why I love it, basically.
Yeah, it's cool because the specificity is so important because it's like you said, you could have 10 different people with an ankle injury or a knee pain or back pain, and it could very well likely be 10 different things that you have to work on. And that it might not be drastically. It's not like these things are always drastic. Like you said, it could be something like the dosage or the intensity or combine it with a movement versus taking them out of a movement, like they're either progressing too fast or too slow. And that stuff's all probably a fun puzzle for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, that sometimes you're like, is there other things that could be affecting this? Because we talk about pain as basically like it's a threat bucket, basically, that fills up. Could be poor movement, vision stuff, all these things, breathing. So that's where all this comes into play. Is I'll usually, in full describe that threat bucket, even draw it out, show them that type of stuff. And all of the things matter. Like your financial status matters, your job happiness matters, your relationship status matters. All these things are just like threats. And some of them are like stress that is very aware to you, but like the visual stuff is something you're not aware of. The vestibular stuff, unless someone's done that specific training with you, is something you're not aware of. So that's where like the awareness for those things, those are the things we focus on at first. Because like I can do vision work with you, I can do vestibular work with you, I can do joint mobility work with you to help you have maps in your brain of all your joints. So we start with that type of stuff. And then if that's not working necessarily, well, we have breathing, we have nutrition, we have all these other things that could be playing a role. And like, one of the things I love is like I watched a TED talk on pain, and the girl had done all this research, and she said like she had a list for this study that she did of the reasons people actually had back pain. And like one of them on the list was mother-in-law was a example on the list. So like someone like there's lots of information coming out about how there's lots of people that are asymptomatic of pain with these physical structural issues that show up on an MRI. So when someone comes to me and they already have that, and they're trying to maybe seek out getting out of pain without having to have the surgery, that's understanding that it's possible. Because like they're looking at studies of like 1,500 people, right? And 85% of them at like the age of 70 or 80 have a herniated disc, but none of them have back pain. So to me, that helps get that, like maybe they have a breathing issue that's creating a postural issue that, and you start connecting the dots with that type of stuff where maybe it's the vision, the breathing, and something else. And it's none of the things you've tried yet. Right. So if we give it a shot, we'll see how it works.
And I love that analogy of the threat bucket because that's something that people don't realize, that all these other things in their life can impact how they're feeling, how their posture is, how their pain is. Uh, Given that you can't necessarily change their financial situation, you can't change their stress at their job. How do you give people the tools to better manage these things, though, and maybe specifically as it relates to breathing or nervous system or drills that they can be doing, down regulation techniques? Is there anything you use to help them manage these stresses so that it
Mm-hmm.
actually helps the pain and helps their performance?
Yeah, I mean, so it goes back to all the approach basically with like maybe looking at vision, and maybe I'm thinking of vision exercise because it's like stimulating the frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe is going to be in charge of like decision making and awareness and focus and attention and anxiety and like PTSD and OCD and all these like mental health issues are actually stemming from something coming from the brain, right? So um, if you can't be like changing your job, but your job's giving you anxiety, like maybe you can um, manage that anxiety through like some breathing work. Maybe it's meditation, right? So like one thing that was like near and dear to me was we're looking at like part of the frontal lobe that atrophies, right? And one of the ways that so it's like you have almost like a physical injury per se in the brain, like that area of the brain is not as strong as someone else's, right? So then that's part of the reasoning around having one of those mental health issues like anxiety or something like that. So then if you do like mindfulness meditation, it actually targets that same area of the frontal lobe. And it's like a specific spot. It's like the ventral mediolateral prefrontal cortex, right? So like I love that because it's again going back to like if I have an elbow issue, I might try to help you with your elbow. But if you have some area of the brain that's being affected, we can work on that, right? So maybe we can't change your job, maybe we can't change your, relationship status or whatever, but if you can do 20 minutes of meditation 4 times a week and you start to strengthen that area of the brain, maybe you start to deal with those things better. You know what I mean? And like, I think the biggest thing with learning myself with having some history of anxiety and depression is you can't necessarily always change like the other person if they're the one affecting you or the job or whatever, but you can strengthen yourself. And that's really what it's coming back to is like, what are the things that are in my control that I can affect change with, right? So I think meditation is obviously, it's like when I started looking into it, it was like all the top most successful people do it. And 80% of the most successful people in the world do meditation. It's like, well, there must be something to this. And for me, it was about getting off medication, which really wasn't really doing the job that I felt like it should be doing, and trying to do it more naturally. And I think just having the options to potentially try that out, I think it can be very powerful. So
Yeah, I love all that. And that's, for people listening, I want to encourage people listening that do find themselves in the situation where they're like, man, I'm up to my head in this and I'm like this. There's strategies you can have even before making any decisions, before making any career changes while you're still, because some people are in that in between area where it's like, okay, I know where I want to be, but like I'm in this right now. And while you're in it, to be doing those things. And if you find yourself not in that situation, to be a little more proactive with it too, would encourage people, because these things can build up their resiliency. And like you said, it's physically kind of like it's flexing that muscle. It's actually training yourself so that when these stressors do hit, you'll be better prepared for them as well.
and it's like it's also a skill that you get better at. And some sessions, like if you're doing meditation for example, it's something you get better at that you're not good at the beginning. Like a lot of people say, oh, it's not really like for me, and it might not be for some people. But like I think at first they think they're supposed to be like really good at it. I'm like, you're not like a monk that's been practicing this for like 6 years. Like you suck at it. Like it's and that's part of the reason why like your brain's not good at that focus and attention part, right? So if you do it consistently over time, like you're gonna have like failed sessions, and that's what a lot of real training really should be more like, in my opinion, is we wind up doing lots of things that like we're good at over and over and over again rather than challenging ourselves. And meditation can be challenging for some people because it's hard to sit there for 20 minutes and just kind of take that time for yourself and focus on how your body feels and have some awareness and all that stuff. And it can be like life altering pretty quickly for a lot of people too.
Yeah. And don't expect to be good at it. Don't beat yourself up when thoughts come in, or you're not, the goal isn't absolute silence in your thoughts and having no incoming thoughts, and start smaller with it too. I know I had a hard time working up to that long of a time. So it's like you start with a few minutes and build up the same way you wouldn't just go take off and go run a marathon your first time running. It's like build up the same way. Like I said, it's flexing a different muscle, but still in a skill that you can learn and build on.
And back to the breath, like with meditation, I think it's an easy way to, most focus for lots of different meditation is breathing. So again, it goes back to a different awareness towards breathing in your body, and that alone makes a huge change, because this world that we're in right now, it's so quick, so much attention to social media and everything else, and trying to keep up, with work and the long hours and all that type of stuff. And like, you don't, that like that's causing this like jitteriness and this lack of being able to pay attention when you get a notification every X amount, like pulling your attention in different ways. Like that's making it harder for you to potentially focus. So just giving yourself the time to allow that, I think is huge also.
Yeah, definitely. And being okay that you don't respond to everything right away, because there's way too many, in that sense, way too many inputs on the phone that it's that can be a tough place to be. I want to kind of, as we wrap up the topic here, do you have any assessments you can maybe quickly talk through, or any videos on these maybe that you can include, or just at least talking through them so that people listening can at least try a couple things to be like, okay, how do I know if I'm good at this or bad at this?
I do have a couple of videos of some of the ones that I was going to mention on here. So I'll try to dig those up and send them out. I think, again, initially, one of the biggest goals with breathing is to bring some awareness. So the initial assessments are really telling on what's going on with how do you normally breathe, which muscles are you actually using, which muscles aren't actually firing as much. And then you can get deeper and deeper and deeper into like learning all the anatomy of the breathing and which muscles you really need to work on, and really creating some huge awareness that create lots of change. Depending on how deep you want to go into it, you can go deeper and deeper. So at first though, simple assessment, very simple, just by the verbal guidance, most people should be able to do it. But my experience is, the thing with breathing is it's not as obvious that you're not doing something correctly, because it's like this in a vacuum. It's like, yeah, I breathe all the time, like I'm always breathing. Of course you are, or else you wouldn't be here, right? But it's not like as visual, right? So we trust, like, I'm working out, my biceps getting bigger as I do bicep curls. The more of them I do, still working, right? Or I'm running, and I started running a year ago, and my time keeps going down. It's very like obvious that you're making progress, right? With breathing, I think that's one of the things that scares people initially, is it's like, I don't really know what we're doing here. Like, this doesn't make much sense. So just breaking down into feeling it and seeing it, I think, can really help. So with this one, if someone was doing it on their own, first I normally have someone actually do it, just for like as an assessment in a session. They would do it, and then I actually have them do it again while looking at themselves, because often they will say, I feel it here, and then when they see it, they're like, oh no, I'm actually doing it over there, right? So simple assessment is basically you put one hand on the chest, one hand on the belly, call it a high-low assessment. Basically what we're looking for is, I don't give any instruction on how to breathe. I just say, take a deep breath, a deeper breath than normal, and just we'll see you tell me which hand moves more, right? So one of the muscles that, for anyone that has started discussing breathing, or if they've done yoga, or if they have any awareness at all, usually people know about the diaphragm. So this test is to see if you're actually using your upper respiratory muscles for most of your breathing, or if you're actually using your diaphragm. And the thing that's interesting as people are aging is there's lots and lots and lots of more diaphragms that are not doing their job anymore. And then that's causing lots of these negative health consequences. It's a huge player in some of those things, like pain and disease states, and like asthma, and lots of other things. So to me, it's a very key thing to bring awareness to, because if every person that I'm seeing that's like over the age of 50 if it's like a high rate, so it's like 70-80% of them aren't using their diaphragm, I could do all the strength training in the world to make you stronger, and lots of it could help. But when I really want to impact your life, getting your diaphragm to work could be like way bigger than any of those things. So it's simple. You just basically do maybe 5 breaths. And for anyone that would watch the video, I'll try to lower it. But you're basically just going, and you're looking for that breathing coming from the belly. But like I said, a lot of people are going to see this kind of movement up here, and that's telling you they're not really able to activate their diaphragm. And often it's actually difficult for them to do at first, even if you tell them what to do. that they need some additional like sensory input to get it working. Could be like a belt, could be a band, could be hands-on, like press into here and actually move it this way, go maybe try it against the wall, like anything that can get them more information for their brain to help figure it out is huge. And then if they can get that going, that can be a huge change. So, and like I said, that's happening with older, but it's also happening with people much younger than that too. And if you're an endurance athlete, that's going to be a big deal too.
And are you checking this in different positions and postures for people?
Yeah. So normally I'm going to do it standing. If they're struggling with it, just getting to do it seated or lying down might be one of the ways that they can actually do it. And then we're very much into like sport specific positioning for any athlete. So like we could be doing it, if you're a pitcher, you could be doing it in a part of your pitching motion, or if you're a football player in like a running, so you could do that in any way. But the initial high-low assessment, usually just standing up.
Cool. And then if people find that they're dysfunctional, so people do that, they're like, wow, my high hand is the one that's doing all the movement. Are there specific drills you lead people to, or is that become the exercise of just bringing more awareness to it?
Yeah. So most likely that's going to indicate they're doing a lot of mouth breathing, right? So the saying within the community of people that are aware of some breathing are to say, basically your nose is for breathing, your mouth is for eating. That's an easy way to remember it, right? So just bringing some awareness to that, like when you're just relaxing, are you breathing through your mouth a lot? Are you catching your mouth open? Are you yawning a lot? Are you sighing a lot, right? You can go through like a questionnaire and see if there's a lot of the questions you answer yes to, you're probably already like on the road to knowing that you're doing the mouth breathing. So one of the things I like to do as a drill is just focusing on nasal breathing. Simple drill basically is you can put your finger under your nose. And when you breathe, you try to actually, so you're trying to like when you're at rest or if you're sleeping or if you're just watching TV or reading, you shouldn't really need to breathe that heavy to get the amount of oxygen, carbon dioxide ratio that you need. So the focus would be like you could do it with a feather, you could do it with your finger, but basically you're trying to breathe in and out without feeling the air on your finger. Like it's very, very light. And even that's hard to do at first because normally you start to focus on breathing, you want to hear it. But when you are really doing like light nasal breathing, it shouldn't be audible. And like even that's difficult, I think, at first to convert to, but just by doing that drill throughout the day for 1 or 2 minutes, maybe 5, 6 times, it can start to bring that awareness level to that, right? And then we actually have a device, it's a cheaper one that we like to use with people. It's called the Relaxator. I think it's like $30. So if you're going to make these large changes, that's again a pretty good return on investment. But basically, one of the premier guys on breathing invented this tool. It has like a little opening on it, basically, that allows you to only breathe out it. So you put it in your mouth. So you can't breathe in through it. So it forces you to inhale through your nose. So you can breathe out if you want, if that's like for your comfort level, but eventually you want to just use the nose the whole time anyway, because there's the benefits. I have like a whole like a couple different things that I send out to people that have like a list of all the benefits from like the nitric oxide production that happens from nasal breathing. There's a couple of awesome books. I don't know if you've dug in any of them. I just read one last week that has been on my list for a while. It's called Breathe by James Nestor. And the stories in there, like if you're not convinced by some of the things I'm saying, there's people, this guy was doing research on this stuff and throwing himself in the mix with different breathing, different styles of breathing for like 10 years. And his stories are like pretty incredible. It's like one of those books you can't put down. So, but like from nitric oxide specifically, vasodilator, decreases blood pressure, improves blood flow to the organs, anti-inflammatory action in the arteries, prevents blood clotting and obstruction in the arteries, immune defense, destruction of viruses and parasitic organisms. So pretty key with our current world status right now. I, was doing a lot of breathing emails to my following when this all happened, because it's one of the easiest ways for you to protect yourself. Plays a role in respiration, obviously. Enables erectile function. So men made for more. I think that's a pretty important one for
Could
long time,
be. Yep.
right? Enhances memory and learning, protects the skin from harmful ionizing radiation, promotes a healthy digestive tract by regulating the secretion of digestive hormones and enzymes, hormonal effects and fluid secretions of hormones from several glands, regulates bladder function, acts as a signaling molecule to maintain normal body functions, and regulation of binding to release oxygen to hemoglobin. So that's a huge part with the whole carbon dioxide oxygen ratio. Is in lots of the books that you'll read about breathing, they'll talk all about how carbon dioxide is like the forgotten molecules, looked at as like a waste product, but really it's the thing that like is driving like a lot of the functionality when you need to take in more oxygen. And it is like the thing that helps deliver the oxygen to like all your muscles. So if you're concerned with that for working out and you're not getting the results that you want, it might be because of its breathing issue.
Man, yeah, there's so much that goes into it, and that's this has been great. I've already learned a lot, and I'd encourage anyone, and we'll circle back at the end to any place where people can find you, because it sounds like you're putting out a lot of good info and sending info out for those that want to get a little deeper into the breathing stuff, more than we can cover on this podcast. And then also, yeah, I'll link up to you after, but any exercise or videos you want to link up, we can put those in the show notes too. If you do have any assessments or things that could be resource for people, we can link those up as well for those that want to dive a little deeper into it. But no question on the importance of breathing at this point, and wherever you want to start, even if it's just with that basic high-low assessment, I think just to start bringing some more awareness to it would be a huge starting point. Just to highlight some of the things we've talked about already. Changing your start to become more aware, if you're listening, of these inputs versus outputs. We focus so much, like David was saying, on the outputs of things, that it's really these inputs that can create massive change in those outputs versus trying to just inch the needle forward with forcing the output. So that's something that stood out to me. I love that you mentioned that the brain is plastic, and that just means that it's never too late to change. You can train the brain the same way you can train other areas of the body. It's a skill. It can be exercise. It can be things that can create some huge performance, some huge performance benefits in terms of how you're feeling, pain, injury reduction. And then I love a comment you made. Last thing I want to summarize here is I love when you said, what's in my control that I can create change with. And that's something that life's going to throw a lot of things at us. But when we focus on what we can control, it's like, okay, well, maybe we talked job stuff, we talked stress stuff. This could even be workout stuff of, hey, I'm not seeing the improvements that I want in my running, in my lifting. What is in my control? Instead of, trying to force it, take a step back and be able to, focus on those things that maybe you haven't tried yet, explore some of these different options like breathing, like nervous system and those things. So those were just a few of the things I jotted down. Anything you want to add to summarize our topic here, David?
It just brings to my mind when we start with the neurology work, the introductory course, they talk about how neurology is the science of hope. And like that was something that for me, for my, the pain that I was dealing with, like I mentioned some anxiety and depression and things like that too, it really gave me a lot of hope, because you just said like it's never too late to make a change. And that really was the thing, was that I latched onto, was like, this stuff is like, I'm going to continue doing this because they've made it very clear that the breathing work, the vision work, the things we talk about can start to make some really legitimate changes. And that's what I've been seeing as I've been practicing this with people. And then one other quick assessment I wanted to mention was we call it like a lobster assessment, but it's basically, I think it's really important because we talked about that left to right stuff with like maybe like having a pain experience, or maybe like most people know like my one bicep's not as big as the other, or like I have tonal issues on one side, like oh, I kind of never get my one quad to look like the other quad or whatever, right? So that brainstem area is also going to be influential in muscle tone, right? So one of the things that can link with that is this lobster test, which is pretty cool because it's simple and easy to do. Yet again, like you could have your friend do it or whatever, but you basically are pinching someone around their rib cage on the lower part of their rib cage, so like mid back, maybe a little bit lower than mid back, and you're putting your thumbs together and trying to grab around their rib cage. Then you have them do like again like a pretty deep breath, and you see are they actually are they doing an expansion on both sides of their lungs. And this is pretty telling for people because often, one, there's a lot of people where the thumbs don't move at all, right? So that means there's no expansion really happening, which there should be, right? If we look at like a anatomy model of a breathing drill on like Google, you just Google that, you're going to see the rib cage is going out in front, in the back, and the side. So that's an issue, right? That's easily, remember we said that, like I was saying that your brain really trusts your eyes. So if I videotape that and show you, you're not moving it at all, right? And then like I have you hold me while I do it. And then you're supposed to see like a 1.5 to 2 inch expansion. If you got not even a centimeter, like we have some potential things that this should be a focus for you, because again, it's bringing that awareness to this is something no one else told you that could be affecting lots of different things. And if we clean this up, which we can do because it's a skill, it could change your life. So then the other thing that you'll see often is maybe like the right side moves, right? And the left doesn't. And then again, that's going to be like some of that opposite side activation can help the other side of the brain. So again, say it was a person with a left shoulder pain and only the left side of the rib cage moves, moving the right side of the rib cage could help with that left shoulder pain because they're getting them to breathe into that side. And then there's other drills to get them to get that side going basically. And then you see, how does it assess? And then even taking the neurology out of that, I can draw some pretty quick postural things to that biomechanically, that like this side of your rib cage is not working. That might be why your shoulder on the other side hurts too, just because, we can look at that very physically and make a distinction if you're not able to visualize the neuroanatomy yet or ever or whatever anyway. So I think that one's really cool because again, it's normal to see that either both sides aren't really doing much or one side's not functioning. And it's just giving proof in the pudding of like, yeah, you need some breathing work, and it's okay because it's something that we know could make a big change for you.
Yeah. And I love that with any of these, first step is awareness. And I think I encourage you guys to try these techniques at home or find a partner, find someone you can try them with, but definitely seek out help with professionals in this. If you're looking for, take it to that next level, these are things that you don't need an expert education in to start bringing more awareness to your breathing. But if you are really looking to, like, you can tell of how complex these things are, if you're looking to take it to the next level, seek out help from someone like David, someone in Z Health, someone who can help guide you a little more specifically with that. So that's awesome, David. I love that. And any other resources you have, would be happy to include those in the show notes there as well. And as we wrap up here, we got our couple last scenarios or questions for you as we transition out of the main event of the topic with breathing and nervous system stuff and into just life as a man. And when we started this podcast, wanted to be professionals, being able to talk and have these awesome conversations like we're having, but also people to see that we don't have these things all together. Us business owners, us men, us professionals, we can put on a front that we have it all together, but like you've already alluded to and said, you've mentioned things like anxiety and depression and things that you've struggled with. And if you don't mind maybe diving a little deeper into those things, how have those things been actually been a catalyst for your growth as a man, of these things that can be like crippling for some people, and these things that people can just brush under the rug, of things that I know a lot of guys struggle with. But how have you kind of worked through those things, and how have they actually grown you through the process of it?
Yeah, I think for me, the anxiety and depression was a huge one. Obviously, I think when you first experience something like that, and it's not something that you the way that you're like used to feeling. I'm sure everyone has their ups and downs normally, but when you're kind of like stuck in a bigger rut, um, and you don't really know what to do to get out of it. Obviously, with me, it included a big life change with work, but it was still there even after that. So it was like, what can I really do to affect this? And I mentioned the meditation before. Um, for me, there was, I think it was one point. I'm very like habit change oriented, so I like kind of challenging myself. I respond well to like some of these things where you're trying to like create like a streak of doing it like X amount of days or something like that. So I think like on the Headspace app, which is what I use for meditation, there would be like these different levels that you could get. Like I did 5 days in a row, or 10 days in a row, or 90, or 180, or 365. And I was like, that's like perfect for me. Right. So it's like just a challenge within the challenge, and it helped motivate me. So it's like I knew I didn't even know the part of the frontal lobe that I was addressing at the time when I started doing this. But after, when I learned that, I'm like, oh, that makes more sense. But I like at one point, I think I did 180 in a row, and I forgot one day, and then I did 484 days in a row of the meditation. So for me, a big part of everything is like the knowledge is definitely important to have the knowledge, but like just like everybody else, in order to get success, you need to apply these things. So I do less of the meditation now. And part of the reason I'm doing that is I know some of the breathing work that I'm focusing on is addressing some similar areas of the brain. So I don't need to do it every day. Or I was paying attention to, you know what, this isn't like as high of a payoff as it was to do it every single day as it was then. There's other things that I need to focus on now, and it's part of the growth and stuff like that. And one of the things I loved initially as we talked through our curriculum is we basically look at it as like a pain to performance spectrum. So any of the drills that help you are basically just trying to get you like up that ladder of pain to performance. And it's beautiful for that, for yourself, because it allows you to just basically compare yourself to yesterday or last year. You know, like lots of our, when we're thinking, we're usually comparing ourselves to other people. Why am I as strong as him? Why can't I run as fast as him? And it's like, if I'm running faster than I did a month ago, that should be enough, right? So just knowing that you're moving up the spectrum, having those goals makes that very important. Like those, maybe it's a streak goal, maybe it's a weightlifting goal or whatever. But I think one of your initial questions we didn't go through was what changed in your training. And like for a long time, I would just train like programmatically, because I was doing an upper body day and a lower body day and a cardio day. And now it's like, you know, one of the examples I had when I started with Z Health was I sucked at the shin box drill, which is basically like you're trying to do windshield wipers, right? I couldn't even go halfway across when I started doing the windshield wipers, let alone people jump out of it, out of the position, like go into a pistol squat out of it and all this stuff. I couldn't even do the wiper. So just the one side was fine, the other side was very difficult. But just like that, focusing on something like that as like, in the next 4 months, I want to be able to do that, or next whatever. I think that allows you to not, there's nothing wrong with doing bench and doing squats and doing powerlifting, all that stuff. But if it's not the thing that's making you consistently better, it's okay to be focused on other things. And the cool thing with the shin box drill was I went to a Z Health course for a weekend, and I had been practicing it for maybe 2 months, and I couldn't get any better. I was doing mobility drills, forcing it, just trying to do it longer. And I came back that Monday after going to course, and it just went like, I was like, there's something to this vision stuff and everything I must have done this weekend, because I've been doing this for like 3 months every day and it never got better. And I didn't pay attention to it for a weekend, and it happened. Right. So, um, I think just the growth part is like whatever you want to be better at, So you can decide a little bit more like what you specifically want to get better at, and like dialing that in is important, because you want to be like men made for more. You want to be a better golfer, and you're only doing like standard exercise and not doing like position specific stuff. Maybe you should be going to like the driving range and go to the free chipping area once a week instead of doing single leg hip hinges, right? So it's okay to do that stuff, but like as you get more specific, you can dial in what you really are trying to get better at. And I think that's a very important thing with the amount of time that you free time that you have to focus on those things. Like really figure out what you want to get better at and start to dial that in, and that I think can make you much happier with your training too.
Yeah, no, I love all that. I appreciate you sharing that. I think the specificity of it, process oriented, trust the process of it, and don't compare yourselves to other are three big things that I grab from that. And as we wrap up here, last hypothetical scenario, and I know we're running out of time here, so we'll hold you to 60 seconds on it. You run into your younger self of 10 years back. So you're leaving coffee shop in town, you're leaving work, you bump into younger David 10 years back, and you're on your way to an important day with clients. You can't be late for it. So you have 60 seconds to talk with him. He's asking you for some life advice, some guidance. What advice are you giving to him? What are you telling him?
Yeah, and this just goes back to one of my favorite quotes from Z Health, and it was, I've had many trials and problems in my life, most of which never happened to me, and it's a Mark Twain quote. I think some other people have said it too, but I bring this up to my clients. It's very big for me. There was when I was in the anxiety, that obviously was a big thing, thinking about all these different things that I was worried about, of what if I change careers? What are my friends going to think? What's my family going to think? What will they think if I quit? What will I think of myself if I quit? I never quit anything prior to that. It was like basically just quitting. So how am I going to start dealing with making less money? Like all this stuff that we talked about. And I had to like, deal with a lot of that stuff, and most of those things like that I was worried about, changing the career, worrying about what other people think. Most people don't really, they're so worried about their own stuff that they don't have time to like, if you're happier because you change careers, they're probably gonna be happier for you anyway. So like it was a lot of wasted time worrying basically about things that never happened. So that quote just like hit me straight in the face, and I was like, that's amazing. And I use it with my clients too, because they bring up, something that they're worried about with a coworker or something like that. And I just go say it. What happens? Like instead of you spending more time a week worrying about saying this thing to your coworker, and then you say it to them and they didn't even like blink.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. No, I love those words to live by. And that's, we work up those things in our head more than they actually are. So David, appreciate all this, man. It's been a blast. Real quick, where can people find you? And we'll link these up in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So on Instagram, Phenomenal Fitness, instead of the PH, it's with an F. So it's like a double F, Phenomenal Fitness. If you want to email me directly, it's dave@phenomenalfitness.com. And then website, if you want to check a little bit out, there's some info on there. You can sign up directly with me on there for training, and that's phenomenalfitness.com.
Appreciate it, man.
No P.
All with the F, and those will be in the show notes. So if you're question how to spell it, just go right there. So appreciate it, man. It's been a blast. Thanks for sharing the knowledge, and I hope people can, or I know people, if they can take and apply it, will take some good stuff away from this. So thanks for coming on.
Cool, man. Thanks. Appreciate it. Had a great time.
Yep.